Okay, good afternoon everyone. I'll give it a moment for people to tune in. The usual minute or two. Just a little time to get this started and rolling on. Quite a windy night tonight, so it sounds like I'm speaking funny. I'm trying to speak up just to make sure I'm heard on camera. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully it turns out okay. Alright, so tonight we're going to be covering the Victorian Crimes Act 1958 section 322K, which covers self-defence. We'll see what we're going to do is we're going to look at the Act as a whole, then we'll break the little sections of it down and pick it apart, discuss it a little bit more in detail to give a much better idea of and an understanding of the Act and how that Act works, how it applies, and certain aspects of it that because just understanding the words, anyone can memorise an Act. So to actually to know it is one thing, to understand it is another. So it's my aim to help people to understand the Act. Because again, if you understand it, even if you can't recite it word for word, if someone's punching you in the face, you're not going to recite it or care for word. No one cares about that. It's irrelevant. But what is relevant is the understanding. And once you understand it, then you've got a knowledge to build upon, so that if the time comes that you ever have to defend yourself, you've got something to base that on and an understanding already in your head. And it's important to understand this stuff long before you're ever in a situation, because it will help you dictate the actions you'll take in a situation should you ever have to defend yourself. I understand it's not, people come to classes and everyone wants to do the gun disarm, the knife disarm, good fun, good times. But the reality is, as fun as that is, as great as it is, even all of that in realistic self-defense terms, if you don't understand the application of it all, it's a bit of fun, but if you go out and use some techniques without understanding why they've been used, and you end up, say, using excessive force, which we've covered a few videos ago in 462A, it's not going to be seen as self-defense, and that's really you're going to have a hard time with that. That's just plain and simple. That's how it is. All right. So I've babbled on a bit. I think it's been a couple of minutes. If you're here, you're here. If you're not, hopefully you're catching it on the replay. So first and foremost, thank you for everyone tuning in, and thank you for everyone watching this on the replay. Thank you for being here. As I said, tonight we're covering the Victorian Crimes Act 1958, section 322K, which is self-defence. We'll look at the whole thing, we'll break it down. So firstly, let's look at the whole Act. Section 322K states, 322K1, a person is not guilty of an offence if the person carries out the conduct constituting the offence in self-defence. 322K section 2 states, a person carries out conduct in self-defence if 2A, the person believes that the conduct is necessary in self-defence, and 2B, the conduct is a reasonable response in the circumstances as the person perceives them, which becomes very important. We'll get into that. And then there is section 322K, section 3, the third part of it, which states the section only applies in the case of murder if the person believes that the conduct is necessary to defend the person or another person from infliction of death or really serious injury. So that's the Act. That's 322K, which covers self-defence. So again, you can recite that in words, as I've said, which is great. But now let's break it down and let's get a bit of a fundamental understanding of it and how that works, so that if you ever had to defend yourself, you can have a better knowledge, which will help you in the decisions you make at the time. So 322K1, a person is not guilty of an offence if the person carries out the conduct constituting the offence in self-defence. So what does that mean? That basically means, or what they're saying is, you have broken a law, but it's in self-defence. Therefore, the law you've broken has become null and void. So you're not guilty of that offence because of the reason you've had to commit that offence. So, for instance, let's look at that as somebody, you're driving, you've accidentally cut someone off, and all of a sudden they're speeding up behind you, they're trying to run you off the road, they try to get in front of you and brake check you, and you're like, man, this is dangerous, they're going to run me off the road, they're going to kill me. So you speed, 20 k's over, and you run a red light, and you get yourself to the police station. You get done on a speed camera, ding, you've committed an offence. Okay, that is the offence. You have speeded, you have ran a red light, you broke some laws. But the reason you've done this, or what's constituted the offence, is, well, someone's trying to run you off the road, you've tried to get to the police station. So you give a statement to the police, you can testify, and chances are, because of what's happened and the conduct of the offence you've committed, you're likely to be let off that because, the offence of speeding is not as great as having to get away from potentially being ran off the road and killed. So, or for instance, if somebody comes barreling up to you like this, fists clenched, veins pulsing red, everything out, sweating, and like this, and you bang and you push them, or even a preemptive strike, bang, you can reasonably argue, okay, well, the offence would be assault, but the reason you've had to push this person or touch them is it's not unlawful of the use of force because they've come barreling up and you've thought they're going to hit you, or they've said they're going to hit you, you're going to get hit, so you've preemptively striked. So that's a big thing. Look, I use this a lot, for instance, say Section 9 of the Summary Offences Act, which is trespass, when I was doing crowd control, and you ask people to leave. So, technically they're breaking the law by not leaving once you've asked them several times, and they refuse to leave private property. So if you were to say, and what it comes down to is that, the force you're going to use is not disproportionate. So, for instance, if it's like, listen, I've asked you 4 times to leave the property, please, can you walk out? I've had enough. Bang! Nobody's going to perceive that as necessary or reasonable, for instance. But, if you were, say, to touch them, a little shepherd or a gentle push or a bit of an arm grab and walk them out, that would be fair enough. So, is it assault? Yeah, technically. But because you've used it to get a trespasser out, and, it sort of circumvents that, it becomes lawful, the reason you're doing what you're doing. Okay, so Section 322K2. A person carries out conduct in self-defence at 2A. The person believes that the conduct is necessary in self-defence, and 2B. The conduct is a reasonable response in the circumstances as the person perceives them, which we've sort of just covered in that last bit. But it's very important to understand necessary and perceived, reasonable and perceived. So we'll break that down, because there's some 3 words that really rotate around this. Necessary, did it have to be done? Okay, so, people sort of get into this idea, they get into arguments, they get into this dance, and then they claim it's self-defence. But you know what, if you're dancing with someone and you're shaping up, you're bouncing about, that's not self-defence. You're signalling, I'm going to fight, I'm going to fight. Now you're playing a game with them, you're doing a little tango. That's not self-defence. It's hard to argue that if you're in the middle of, say, an open field doing this, that you just didn't walk away, go, mate, listen, not doing this, goodbye. So that would be the argument for necessary. Is it necessary? So another point could be, say, if someone's taking your car spot, the first thing you do is you walk out snotting. I mean, is that necessary? Many would argue, and I think rightly so, that's not necessary. Person probably didn't even steal your spot, which this is what comes down to perceives as well, like the person probably didn't steal your spot, they're probably off in their own little world. And then you look at, the circumstances, what's reasonable? Would it be reasonable to, someone calls your mother a whore? It's not nice, I've heard that a lot working on doors and clubs. But would it be reasonable to punish someone for this offence? You know, that's what you said about my mother. My mother. Is that reasonable? Yes, yes. Is that reasonable? Bang. Well, the truth is, no. You know, these are words that people just put together to elicit an emotional response from you. And if you give them an emotional response that turns into a physical response, that is unlawful. It's not reasonable. Again, you know, we're starting to look at what's reasonable. And perceives, you know, as the person perceives the circumstances, which is how you start to get the old chestnut of everyone who's like, oh, well, you know, I'll just say I was in fear of my life and that's why I did what I did. Great, great. Let me know how that works out for you. Probably not good, and I'll tell you why. Because as we've discussed, you need to basically, if it goes to a court of law or whatever, you need to justify necessary and reasonable, and why it was necessary and reasonable, and what led you to believe that you were perceived you had to defend yourself. So why is it that you believe this? So this comes down to, and I think we'll do the video maybe tomorrow, depending on my job and what happens. We'll see with that. But opportunity, means and intent play a big part in this. So, you know, the person has to have the opportunity to do what they're going to do. They have to have the means. They have to have the intent. So I think we'll cover more of that. We'll try for tomorrow or next week in the next video, because that is very important. And all of that ties in with all of this, and all of this ties in with section 462A, which is the use of force, and the use of force continuum, which we covered a few videos ago. So you start to see how all of this all works together to start formulating like how much force you can use, why you're using force, and if it's necessary and reasonable. I mean, for instance, say you have someone high on drugs and they've gone to their drug dealer's house with a machete or a sword or something of such, and they've hacked or stabbed at and trying to kill their drug dealer because they perceive the drug dealer owes them drugs or money or something of the like. One could argue that's not self-defense, and I think that would be rather fair to argue. You know, because they've taken themselves to the place, they've armed themselves up. It's showing a premeditation, okay? The funny thing is when intoxicating substances wear off, people tend to lose the bravado and the courage and everything, and they're likely to end up in GP. The funny thing is they're likely to end up in GP begging for protection and being told by the COs to buzz up and head back to Boneyard. It's interesting how that works. Another instance could be if you had people of or persons of authority, you know, and you're there with your mates, you're trying to walk away. Look, if people, or whether they have authority or come from an area of authority or not, you know, if you perceive and you can argue that they've reasonably tried to block you off, that they've either stalked or harassed you, say crossed the road, and either pushed you or your mate, you know, basically trying to start a fight, then clinch you in, you know, and then, you know, bang, and they're either hitting you or your mate. Yeah, I mean, you could start to make a reasonable argument. Listen, you know, there's stalking, there's harassment. They've got weapons, you know, they've got numbers, we're outnumbered. You know, you can start to make a reason for why you perceived self-defense, especially if you weren't told, as this happened, that you're under arrest and why. But look, I want to point out very quickly on all of this, I'm not a lawyer. So I can teach you about this, I can break it down, I can give you an understanding of it, but I'm not a lawyer. So I give you examples, make of them make of the examples what you will. And what I can say is, you know, if you ever had to be in a position where you have to defend yourself, I'm not going to be there with you anyway. Well, the chances are pretty highly unlikely. So we try to teach you this and break it down. I give you these examples as something to think about, you know, a bit of food for thought. That way, again, helps you understand the Act, helps you get an idea, you know, open your mind up and think about it, and start thinking about situations you might be in so that, you know, you can get an idea of how it all works and what you may or may not have to do if you ever had to defend yourself. Like I said very earlier in the video, the idea being that you're getting an idea in your head so that you, you know, you've had this all understood in your head before ever having to defend yourself. Because this is the stuff you do not want to be thinking about when you're getting punched in the head, for instance. It's too late. And 322K section 3, the last bit of the section, This section only applies, or the number 3 of the section only applies in the case of murder if the person believes that the conduct is necessary to defend the person being yourself, or another person being a loved one, or even a stranger, I suppose, but that being a third-party defence, from the infliction of death or really serious injury. So what we're talking about here is the upper end of everything, you know, potential lethal force or what has become lethal force. So, for instance, if someone's held a gun to you and in the course of disarming the gun, you've turned the gun and it's fired and the bullets come out the hot end, hit the person who was attacking you and they're dead, or you know, they've had a knife to your throat and you've pulled it off and chopped into the throat, and then they've got swelling of the throat which has restricted their breathing and they've died from being unable to breathe, the tracheostomy hasn't been put in time. Yeah, we're talking the absolute high end, the person has died now. So this is the serious pointy end of the stick. So again, it comes down to your opportunity, means, intent. You're really going to have to argue, and I mean, you've killed someone. So you're going to be arguing, you want to argue very hard the necessity of what you've done and why, and how and why it was reasonable. So then you're going to start pointing out the opportunity, means, intent, you know, of the other person, you know. Yeah, and this is where you really want to be well versed in body language, you know, and knowing what you're looking for, what you're seeing, and not just that, the importance of being able to articulate that. You've got to be able to know the law and then articulate why you've done what you've done as well. Articulate would be a very important word, I'd say, because if you can't articulate it, if you can't express it for someone else to understand, it doesn't matter what you understand. If you've had to defend yourself, then you're standing up in court. It doesn't matter what you understand. It's good that you understand it, but if you cannot articulate what you've done and make someone else understand what you've done and why you've done it, and it doesn't matter how innocent you are, you may still end up in prison. And prison's full of innocent people. Some may actually be innocent. A lot of them, you know, say they're innocent. Probably not, but that's a matter of opinion. The law is very funny like that sometimes too. So keep that in mind. You may be innocent if you cannot articulate yourself and explain, you know, your reasonableness of what you did and the necessity and opportunity, means, intent, the amount of force you've used, the force continuum and why. You can end up in very big trouble, especially if it's come down to potential lethal force. Okay, so the section 322K does make mention of section 322M, which covers family violence, which is as to believe in the circumstances where family violence is alleged. May do another video on that at a much later date. That's sort of, although it's part of 322K, it starts to move off in that more specific direction. And covering too, you know, the circumstances in which a person may carry out conduct in self-defence. You know, so basically what they're saying is the circumstances and the conduct of what you do in self-defence can be the defence of the person, yourself, or another person, and the protection of property. Strangely enough, it actually says for the protection of property. Now, I want to put a quick little note in there. When we're talking about protection of property, just be very, very, very careful. Although it's in there, you want to be careful. Because, well, if you're defending, say, your car, one could argue, well, it's just property, just walk away. You know, if someone says, give me your wallet, sometimes it might just be better to give them the wallet and, yeah, technically, is it self-defence? Well, here's my wallet, bang! Yeah, sure, could be, depending on the circumstances, especially if they've, say, alluded to a weapon, or got a weapon, or you're backed in a corner. But it might also be easier just, okay, you got to do call the police, you know. So just be careful with that last little section. It's I don't want anyone. I mean, you can always replace property. You cannot replace a life, and that's another video again. Okay, so you can go defend your car or whatever, and then the person turns around, has got a knife, boom, 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 gives you a couple of good shanks. You might even tie up with them, because you know you've done some martial arts, grabbing your car, and then that knife comes around and boom, boom, boom in your kidney as well, and now you're having a pretty bad day. So property, it's just like I said, be careful with that one. You can replace property, you cannot replace a life. Now just to break it down quickly, a quick look at 322L, which just gives a quick little cover of what self-defence is not, which we sort of covered anyway, but let's go over it just to be sure. So section 322K does not apply if A, the person is responding to lawful conduct, and B, at the time of the person's response, the person knows that the conduct is lawful. So just to break that down quickly, back to my original story in section part 1 of 322K. So you've been asked to leave somewhere 3 times, say a nightclub or whatever. Technically you've broken the law. So the security guard or the police officer, whoever, does have the lawful right now to evict you. So if they put a hand on you, it's lawful. So if you turn around and slap them, you've just assaulted them. That's an unlawful act. That's not self-defence, because you're breaking the law anyway by not moving. Now, the other part of that is if you know what's happening to you is lawful, and then it doesn't constitute as self-defence. So you can argue, if I didn't know it was lawful, or if you didn't know it was lawful, you say, well, I didn't know it was lawful. Yeah, I just had this person hitting me and boom. But you know what? If someone has clearly told you 1, 2, 3, I say 2, 3 times, I think sometimes, people get adrenaline or it's loud or whatever. They don't always hear the first time. So I like to do it a few times. I like to be a bit loud about it. Loud but clear. This is what's happening. This is what I knew. So that way, like say, so for instance, when you're being arrested, the officer's meant to say, you're under arrest, and they're meant to tell you what you're under arrest for. Okay, now if you sit there and go, bang, 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 like let's say the video I posted the other day in Sydney, you give the coppers a flogging, that's unlawful. That is unlawful. You've been told you're under arrest. So you know you're under arrest, you know why you're under arrest. And sitting there playing stupid is, don't do it. Don't do it. Because everyone knows when you're playing stupid and it's not clever, it's not funny, and it will not get you off the hook. Let's make that very clear. It will not get you off the hook just because you say, oh, well, I didn't know. You probably did know if you were told. So have a think about that one, because a lot of people like to try and play that. But if, like I say, people tried to pull the whole unlawful assault on me in security. It's like, but mate, you've been told, 3, 4, 5 times that you need to leave the venue. Now, I've explained Section 9 of the Summary Offences Act to you in the private property law. And, I've let you know, and I've given you opportunities to leave, and I've said to you, I want you to walk out, because I prefer a dignified response. You walk out, you're more than welcome back tomorrow. Now I've asked 4, 5, 6 times, okay, I've had to grab you. And if they go to walk up and hit me, say, oh, well, this is unlawful, boom. And I say, well, okay, we just up the ante a bit. We move into restraints and control, and we walk you out, not a problem. Okay, so what I would be doing, say, in that instance, completely lawful. Use of force, not an overuse, but lawful, because we're ejecting someone from a venue after being asked to leave and after it's been explained. If they were to, say, attempt to hit me, technically speaking, that is unlawful, because they know what's happening. It's been explained to them. They understand that. They just don't want to accept it. Again, same with the police. If they tell you why you're under arrest, they say, listen, okay, well, here you go, I know. So that's again, looking at reasons where you know it's not self-defence. So if you know it's not self-defence and you go ahead and conduct the offence anyway, say if you say back to the car, speeding, pushing, shoving, hitting, you know it's unlawful then, because, well, you've got no reason or basis to base it on, which then goes back to the idea of people say, oh, well, I'll just claim I was in fear for my life. Well, why were you in fear for your life? What was it that made you in fear for your life? Quite a long time ago, I did a video, who, what, when, where, why. And again, very important, because they're going to bring this up in court. What made you feel you're in fear for your life? What made you feel that you had to defend yourself? Why did you do what you did? What was it that made this happen? Why? Who did this that made this? That would lead to a reasonable belief in your mind to make this acceptable. That's what it comes down to. You need to articulate and explain why it's acceptable. So I hope this breakdown of the Act has helped give you a better understanding of the Act itself and how it works, and it's a bit mozzie, sorry, and an understanding of, not just an understanding of an Act, but a way to break it down so that you can sit there and think about, well, if this happens and I did this, would it be self-defence or not? Yeah, and it's important to start thinking about scenarios like that and getting it through your head, so that if you end up at the parking lot tomorrow and someone does accidentally take your park, and there you've already thought about it, you know it's not self-defence, you can take a breath, go, person probably didn't see me, they're probably having a shit day too, so breathe. I poked my head out. Excuse me, sir, I don't think you realise I had my blinker on. I've been waiting for that park. I think you'll find too with social aggression and violence, most of the times people will sit there going, oh mate, I'm so sorry, tunnelling in, didn't even see you, I apologise, look, I'll move out the park. I didn't realise you were waiting. Most people actually look to avoid violence and argument anyway. So, but you think about that and you think about the responses you're going to start to make, thinking about 322K now and how we've broken it down, and you can start to see these responses and how self-defence does and does not work. Anyway, I'm going to stop the video here for today. As I said, hopefully tomorrow, depending on times and work and what happens with my job tomorrow, I'm hoping to be back on time, do a video. If not, next Friday, we'll cover opportunity, means and intent, just to give you a bit more of a better understanding of that. And then you can come back, watch this video again if you want, or don't, up to you. And then again, watch the other recent videos, or don't, and see how it all ties in. Anyway, thank you for joining me tonight. Thank you for watching the video. For everyone that's here, and thank you for everyone that's watched the video on the replay. Any comments, queries, please send them through. Let me know what you think. Feel free to share the video around with friends, family, if you think it's going to help them. And I'm, again, as always, more than happy to answer comments, queries, questions and all as it comes through. So please let me know your thoughts. So until next time, please stay safe, look after yourselves, look after each other. Thank you.